There are different ways to conduct research to help determine how to negotiate a merger or acquisition, as well as conduct research to help bring the deal to a close. Today on Zippy Point. I'm Brock Romanek, and I'm a big fan of use. So there's no one-size-fits-all approach to this. Not only do different law firms do it differently, different lawyers within a law firm may have a different style, a different approach, or perhaps their approach will vary depending on a particular deal's circumstances. So here are 7 steps typically that happen to get a deal done. 1, the basics. If a client says to look at a potential deal, a potential target, or someone that might acquire your client, you'll start pulling the types of documents that allow you to have a full picture of the other company's situation, their SEC filings, the 10Ks, the 10Qs, the 8Ks, the glossy annual report, the proxy, including all the relevant exhibits that they filed that might bear on an acquisition, such as rights plans, shareholder agreements, credit agreements, the executive pay documents, employment agreements, stock incentive plans, and the company's charter and bylaws. I have a separate Vid-Guide that explains each provision in a typical charter and bylaws, a link to which is beneath this video. You'll pull any media articles you can find about this other company. Look at their corporate website. You'll try to figure out who their stockholders are, all their major institutional investors, all their insider owners. You can find some of this information by looking at a company's latest proxy to find their 5% or greater shareholders as of the date of the proxy. But you'll probably also do some research on a Bloomberg terminal or looking at FactSet or Capital IQ. You also may pull the company's defense profile, find out what their anti-takeover defenses are from a website called Shark Repellent. 2, precedent deals. You might be gathering precedent pretty early on to help negotiate the letter of intent, to help figure out what the structure of the deal should be. Your law firm might have an extensive library of precedent deals, or you're going to be relying on third-party databases. There's at least a half a dozen of them. You got Practical Law Company, Bloomberg, IntelliGize, for example, to help find deals similar to what your client desires. If you know the law firm already that's going to be working for the other side, you want to help find deals that they've worked on before. Look at what their precedent is to help buttress your negotiating points. It's golden when you find evidence that they did things your way in a recent deal. It's hard to argue two sides of a coin, but of course they may try to do that. 3, deal term studies. You could also lean on a host of studies to help show what's market. The ABA's M&A committee has a bunch of popular studies. The M&A deal point studies for public targets, for private targets, in Canada, in the European Union, in the US, for carve-outs particularly, all kinds of studies that committee puts out. SRS Acquium also has a bunch of studies like the ABA's M&A committee, and it also includes some ones that the ABA committee doesn't have. For instance, reps and warranties insurance terms. Law firms, investment banks also have these. For example, Nixon Peabody does an annual study on MAC clauses. 4, due diligence memos. Early on, you're going to talk to your client and find out what the scope of due diligence, the extent of due diligence that they want you to conduct. Learn that up front and work from there. In addition to the scope, find out what the format is that the client prefers. Do they merely want a memo that just identifies deal-killing issues? Or do they want a full-blown, very extensive due diligence memo that has a laundry list of every document reviewed along with a summary of each of those documents? 5, working group list, time and responsibility schedule. So in order to build a working group list, build a T&R schedule, you're going to have to gather a bunch of basic information. You're going to find out the particulars of your deal team, the other deal teams, and then find out the information about the deal itself. What's the transaction structure? What's supposed to be the schedule? What are the deadlines? What does the term sheet look like? What are the primary deal terms? What are the scope of services for which your firm was hired? What was the billing arrangement? You need to figure that out when you present your bills to the client. 6, merger agreement drafting. If your client is a serial acquirer, odds are that they have their own form of agreement to work with. Or maybe the client relies on your firm's forms. But maybe this deal has a twist. Even a serial acquirer might have a twist. So you might have to find some precedent deals on one of the third-party databases or on the SEC's Edgar to do some research, to do some form checking, to find out what you need to know. 7, closing checklists. So a closing checklist is a universal thing, ensuring that you got all your boxes checked. Without a checklist, you may screw up some minor paperwork that could threaten to tank a deal and cause you to lose your job. Some practitioners use two closing checklists, one for the lawyers, the paralegals actually handling the closing with a detailed list of the individual documents that need to be collected, who is responsible for collecting those, and the status of that workload. This checklist is constantly being updated. The other checklist, if you have one, is for your client. It's more high level, laying out the transaction structure so they can understand where they are in the transaction and what needs to occur to get the deal closed. And at the end of the deal, all the documents presented at the closing are wrapped up into a closing book. Typically, this is an electronic amalgamation these days, but in the old days, they were big binders of paper. Some paper binders are probably still out there, still being compiled today, but that's definitely a dying practice. Anyways, let me know what you think.